It is the final tune-up before Augusta this weekend. It is the Valero Texas Open. Got some pretty fun hitters in the field for this week, including Ludwig Aubert, Corey Connors, Tommy Fleetwood, Patrick Cantlay, and more. So, hey, still a pretty decent field on tap for this week. We're going to dive in to the Valero Texas Open, letting you know our favorite bets at FanDuel Sportsbook and our top DFS picks for the week as well. Welcome on into the Heat Check, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research, joined here as I am every Tuesday by Brandon Gdula. You can find him on X at Gdula13. He is on Blue Sky at Gdula. Check out his work at FanDuel Research, where he is a senior managing editor. Brandon, we are 1 week away from Augusta. TPC San Antonio on tap this week. How you doing today?
I'm good. I am ready for some golf. I'm kind of tired of the cold weather. I have been able to get out and golf a little bit in Central PA, so it's not like it's been the worst March. Now that we're into April, hopefully the weather picks up. But I mean, the furnace is still kicking on and it's freezing, so I want that to go away. But I'll get a little slice of that as we watch golf down in Texas again this weekend.
Unfortunately, potentially some rain again this week at TPC San Antonio. I am annoyed with rain because it ruins timing for three balls. That's the only thing that actually matters is when do tee times the next day come out so I can look at three ball stuff. So selfishly, for that reason alone, I need that to stop. And a little bit dicey this week. Don't think it's a situation like we had a couple weeks ago where it'll be keotally dependent on tee times to decide we want to bet and stuff like that, but still weather a factor this week. More importantly, clear out for Augusta next week and keep things clean and clear for that. As mentioned for today, we're going to dive in to the Valero Texas Open, letting you know what you should know about TPC San Antonio, some course history, current form, favorite bets at FanDuel Sportsbook, and top DFS picks as well. We'll dive in all that here in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the FanDuel Research Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. Every Tuesday, we're with you here talking PGA best bets and DFS picks, getting you set for that week's PGA Tour event. But next week, Brandon, a twofer over on the FanDuel Golf Betting YouTube page as well. Not just the Heat Check, which will be up, but they'll be up on Monday. We're going to go through our favorite outright bets of the Masters and top DFS picks Monday. Then on Tuesday, we're circling back and covering the spread. Going to go through a full betting breakdown of the event. We don't want to overload things on the Heat Check side of things. A lot of you used to listen from a DFS perspective. And also, we have more markets up on Tuesday. We don't want to make you wait until Tuesday to get your outrights in. So, 2 shows next week on the FanDuel Golf Betting YouTube page, both the Heat Check and covering the spread. Heat Check Monday, covering the spread Tuesday. To get both those as they're posted, just subscribe to the FanDuel Golf Betting YouTube page. Leave us a thumbs up there and turn on notifications to get those podcasts as they go live. This bracket season, FanDuel's letting you make the call because right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That is $200 extra bucks to bet on everything from clutch shots to last-second heartbreaks, even who is cutting down the nets. If you've been waiting to join FanDuel, there is no better time. There's tourney action almost every day, and FanDuel has amazing bet types like spreads, totals, game props, and so much more. So visit the FanDuel Sportsbook app today and get in on the college hoops action all tourney long. Must be 21 plus and present in select states or 18 plus and present in DC. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or visit FanDuel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/Chat, Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here for the Gambling Helpline, ma.org, or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Let's dig in now to TPC San Antonio. Let's know the key stats for this week. It is the Oaks course at TPC San Antonio, which is 7,438 yards in a par 72. There are 154 golfers in the field. The top 65 plus ties will make the cut after the first two rounds. Again, this is the final chance for people to qualify for Augusta. They can win and in if they're not already in. So a lot on the line for this week. Brandon, what should people know about TPC San Antonio for this week?
Yeah, you mentioned the par 72 nature of it, longer course, but surprisingly, distance is not super relevant. And even though it's a long course with narrow fairways, the rough just isn't penalizing enough for it to matter. The greens are still a little bit larger than your average on the PGA Tour. Winning scores the last 4 years. 5 years ago, we had the pandemic, so no event here. But 20 under, 15, 13, and 18 under. So you got to make some birdies. It's not the biggest birdie fest by any means where you got to go 30 under or you have no chance. Wind conditions can definitely play a factor at this setup. But overall, when you dig in, again, you're kind of looking at, yes, narrow fairways, but not super penalizing rough, and yes, longer holes, but distance has not really mattered too much. What you've really seen is a bit of a downgrade to off the tee play and just a sort of elevation on overall kind of tee to green. So if you look closely at the hole by hole breakdown, just 6 out of 18 holes are shorter than sort of the PGA average based on relative to par for each hole. But there's some added length like throughout the rest of the holes. It's not just 3 super long holes, anything like that. It's just kind of consistent. But even with that, distance has not mattered too much. Where distance might kind of factor in is actually on the proximity. You see some long approaches, or more frequent long approaches, not longer. I guess I was gonna say longer approaches, but basically proximity from like 250 plus. If you go to Data Golf and look at a single year breakdown of a tournament, you'll see sort of the approach shot frequency distribution. A lot of longer approaches in. I think that's where the distance might come into play, because you do have to be. It's so hard to like kind of put into terms. It's not that penalizing to miss the rough, but you don't want to be punching out or anything like that. So just basically being not terrible off the tee is going to be important, and then having the rest of your game clicking. You see a stronger than average correlation with strokes gained approach and around the green play at TPC San Antonio than you do typically on the PGA Tour course. So what does it all mean? It's not that I don't care about driver, but I don't care about distance too much, but I also don't care enough about accuracy. What I'm kind of really looking for this week is the other 3 strokes gained stats, though. It's going to be approach, it's going to be putting second, and then around the green. So again, I'm not looking for golfers to be terrible off the tee and say, hey, this is the week where you just kind of go crazy with driver. It's not really that, but statistically over these last 4 years, what you see is that this is a second and sometimes third shot course, and you got to be able to sort of gain strokes tee to green, which, yes, I know includes driver, but it's really not being terrible with your irons and wedges.
And you say you're not seeking out guys who are bad off the tee. I might be. Some of my win picks this week might lend itself towards guys who are not great off the tee. And that's always kind of freeing. We can look at these guys who are really good elsewhere. We can get some shine to some golfers who have good short game, stuff like that. You will sometimes cite stats like approach through putting, strokes gained approach through putting that might come up later on as well. So can de-emphasize driver overall for this week. Speaking of which, let's dig into golfers who have done well at TPC San Antonio in the past. Corey Connors, obviously topping the list. Not a bad driver by any means. He's good there, obviously, but there are some guys on this list who may not be the most prolific drivers. Who stands out? Look at past history at TPC San Antonio.
Yeah, so last 4 years, total strokes gained average, and this actually cuts out a win for Corey Connors back in 2019, but he's been 25th, 1st, 35th, and 14th at TPC San Antonio. And, I kind of danced around it a little bit, but of the last 7 winners, all of them finished top 5 in strokes gained tee to green for the week. When you think tee to green, you kind of think Corey Connors. So that tracks. Now, I will talk about a couple people who maybe don't exactly fit that. Going to be a little bit interesting, but he enters with great form. 4 straight top 24s, 3 straight top 10s. At some pretty good events, including Genesis, Arnold Palmer Invitational, the Players, and the Valspar. So our guy is kind of vibing right now, peaking. So kind of all eyes on Corey Connors right now. But next up is another name that we've been talking about for a good while. And I mean like years, but now for different reasons.
Yes.
That's Denny McCarthy. Second, 18th, and 34th in his 3 starts in this span. He's got top 20s in 4 of his last 5. He's gained an approach in all 5, though. And we love to see that. This is, according to Data Golf, Denny McCarthy's career peak in rolling 50 round average in approach play. Denny McCarthy with irons is going to be a great golfer. He's going to be in the mix. So
at a course where he was already good.
Yeah.
We both like Denny McCarthy weekly. I will just say it. We like him this week. I'm using him in my season-long contest. We're gravy.
Yeah. So Denny's got a lot going for him this week, but also, that doesn't, yes, he's peaking right now with the irons, but historically not the best iron player. Someone whose irons have been better in the past, third on the list, Jordan Spieth. He's won here 4 years ago, 35th and 10th as well. He's been top 10 at Phoenix and the Cognizant in his last 5 starts. He was top 3 in approach in 2 of these 5, but it's kind of all over the place overall. So, I mean, there's upside. There's also a lot of downside with Spieth right now still. So no real change, but maybe I'm a little higher on the probability that he hits his upside, I guess is what I'll say.
Yeah, the Spieth coaster is having some ups right now, which is good. You're still going to have the valleys, but like the ups are there, which is always encouraging.
Next up is Matt Kuchar. He's missed the cut last year, but 3rd, 2nd, and 12th. Before that was T7 in 2019, but in total, he's got 8 top 25s and 12 starts here with just 1 missed cut, which was last year. He's Matt Kuchar. He's a good golfer. He's not perfect, but at courses where he can still play well, even though this is longer by the yardage, still relatively interesting. He's got a sub $9,000 salary on FanDuel at 8,800 from a DFS standpoint. Akshay Bhatia is next up with the win last year. 46th and missed cut before that, though. So, not the most consistent for him, but did get the win here. Was T3 at Players and 9th also in Mexico and the Genesis. So kind of vibing, sub $11,000 salary for him at 10,800. Kind of interesting there. Chris Kirk, name we haven't talked about in a while for good reason, really. But his salary is up. Don't quote me on this, but I'm assuming it's up to 8,900. 10th, 35th, and 6th for him the last 4 years. And it's 3 years, but he didn't play here last year. 3 straight made cuts in 5 of his last 6 with solid iron play, but some pretty bad putting overall. So maybe you need a value play. Maybe you look there, but I don't know that I'm quite going to get there. But it's not off the table yet. Sam Stevens next up, just 2 starts for him, but a 2nd and a 14th. The irons are kind of cold right now. They're a little up and down, but his only top 30 in his last game last week in Houston when he led in strokes gained around the green, which is a key stat, sure, but not how you want to finish well. It's kind of how I play golf, is some greasy par saves, and that's not going to get you. That's why I also shoot high scores, but sometimes I can keep rounds afloat. Charlie Hoffman, of course, TPC San Antonio, Charlie Hoffman, salary's 9,300. Was 69th last year, 22nd, missed the cut, and 2nd before that. Won here in 2016. He's got 5 top 5s and 10 top 25s, and 14 starts with just 1 missed cut. Putter's really bad lately, but he's still a pretty good iron player. So interesting there. And then rounding things out, we got Hideki Matsuyama at 11,400. The irons for him right now are not what you'd expect from Hideki. Doing a lot with the wedges, which again is something I want this week, but it's not the most bankable. Ben Martin, 3 straight missed cuts, current form wise, but 2 straight top 10s here. So do with that what you will. And then Gary Woodland, kind of an interesting name. Made a push last week, T2, good irons and putting. It's not that far removed from 3 straight top 25s in January and February. Mid-level salary at 10,000. You think tee to green, you historically have thought of, Gary Woodland. So I think there's a lot of names here. Anybody jump out to you?
Do you want to talk about Connors quick? Because obviously you mentioned the current form with all the good finishes recently. Obviously the course form is good, and we know that like tee to green, Connors, tremendous player. The issue I run into is I don't think anyone's sleeping on him this week based on where the market's at. He is 16-1 to win, which is probably shorter than I've ever seen Corey Connors ever for a tournament. I can't recall him ever being shorter than that. Tied to Fleetwood, Cantlay is longer, Spieth longer, Hideki longer. Ludwig Gobert, the only guy shorter at 12-1. From a DFS perspective, Connors 11-8. So we both love Corey Connors. We think that his game translates well here. We think he's a good golfer. We like the form. We like the course history. I can't get there this week just because I think the market's already accounting for that stuff. Are you kind of in the same space with Connors, or are you inclined to buy him despite where things are at?
I get it. He's peaking. He's trending. He's at a course where he certainly can pick up wins. He's got 2 here. I believe his only 2 career wins, both at the Valero Texas Open in 2019 and 2023, which he kind of did. I mean, he did in 2023 with pretty neutral putting. He didn't blow the doors off with the putter in 2019 either. He's actually, let me confirm this, but yeah, this is by far his best putting season since he's been a PGA Tour member. Interestingly, some of his weakest iron play, his weakest since 2019. So I get it. I get why he's here. But like you said, I think you're just kind of paying.
You're paying top of market price, whereas you can pay somewhat potentially depressed prices on some other guys. So I think that's my big issue. Yeah.
That's one of the hardest parts about all of this is you can't argue the course form. You cannot argue the current form, but you still have to factor in where things are, whether it's DFS salary or betting odds.
So let's delve more into that current form and talk about some guys who are in really good form right now entering the Valero Texas Open. Who stands out to you, Brandon, when you look at the list of guys in the best form right now?
So this was an interesting exercise. What I always do is I go to Data Golf, pull up the true strokes gained query over the last 3 months. There was such a tier system this week that it was hard not to like usually we're looking for golfers with salaries below 10,000 on FanDuel. Keep it simple, kind of highlight some names that you'd expect a Tommy Fleetwood to be in good form, for example. But things drop off kind of a lot. So Alex Smalley's last here, he's 40. So there are 14 golfers gaining at least 1 shot per round on the field after field strength adjustments over the last 3 months. But that is actually kind of a lie because Smalley's at 1.24 and nobody else is above a 0.9. So there's 14 guys at the top here, but there's more separation even from that. So I'm going to keep this one simple, but there might be one of these 5 names you'd like to talk about. Tommy Fleetwood's at a 1.95, same as Patrick Cantlay in this span. They lead, but it is a sub 2.0 number, which is still strong, but it's not phenomenal. So I can't miss. Scotty's at 3.5. So for context, Hideki is at a 1.81. Daniel Berger at a 1.64, and his salary is only 10,400. Those other 3 names all at least 11,400. And then Keegan Bradley, whose salary is 10,900, he's at a 1.51. So even that's a bit of a drop. So you got kind of 3 big names above a 1.8, with Berger and Keegan above a 1.5. Does that tell you anything at the top?
It tells me that there's no true favorite and that the favorites who are here are kind of vulnerable because yes, like you said, they are above the pack, but they're also not above 2. And this is a 3-month sample. It's a pretty small sample. Look at the past 6 months. Fleetwood leads away 1.89 true strokes gained. Cantlay second 1.78, and then Keegan a 1.64, Hideki 1.55, actually Batia 1.49. Then it falls off from there. So kind of a similar thing where it's they're good and they're above the pack, but they're also not prohibitive. And also a guy who's not in that group either split is Ludwig Gobert, partly because he had some really bad events in there. He was dealing with some sickness and stuff like that. And obviously we saw at Torrey Pines, he can go berserk too. but it's also just not a course. It's not a Ludwig setup, because I want Ludwig at a place where his superpower can shine, and that's not this week. So what that says to me, maybe this is like a confirmation bias thing, so check me on this. I feel empowered to bet golfers who are not the favorites this week. I feel empowered to take some swipes at some guys who are 28, 35 specifically, to 1 to win, in the 50s and 60s. I think that's okay every week if the value is there. I think that's more okay this week because there are fewer impediments, fewer roadblocks to a hypothetical Daniel Berger win, fewer roadblocks to a hypothetical Denny McCarthy win than usual. Is that an okay takeaway in your eyes?
Yeah. So to go back to like the Scotty conversation, usually you're dealing with a Scotty or a Rory. Last week we had, sometimes it's both. Yeah. Next week it feels like it's going to be like, is it them or the field? And mathematically it's still the field, but it's going to feel like it's one of those two. Right. But over the last 3 months, Collin Morikawa leads the way to 2.93 true strokes gained. And there are, let's see here, 6 names above a 2. That's Justin Thomas, Russell Henley, Joaquin Niemann, shout out, Scotty Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, and Collin Morikawa. You don't really have that like peak golfer right now. So I'm inclined to agree with you. Mm-hmm. The flip side, at least, is there's another tier below this of guys who come from the course form section and who were next in line before like a tier drop, where we have Corey Connors at a 1.36, Akshay at a 1.32, and Denny McCarthy at a 1.31. I know you mentioned the 28-1 number specifically. I know. With Denny McCarthy, mm-hmm. I think these guys get a little bit of a boost. You're not really like Denny McCarthy doesn't have 2 wins here, so like that's part of it. He's also not quite as good long term as Corey Connors necessarily, so I get it. But for me, I think this all ties in where there's not like a true Ludwig's a FOMO fade because at his peak he might be the best golfer in the world.
Sure,
but like you said, like his game, he hits it really far, which is helpful here, but not super important. His wedges are not great. He's also kind of like typically one of the weaker iron players among the favorites, just long term. So I'm with you. I like looking at some longer names. I will say I'm not looking quite as far as 28 to start things with, because I think someone's coming off of maybe the TGL championship bump here too. But I think it's a really interesting week. We haven't, if there's no Scotty and there's no Rory and there's no like peak Xander, this is kind of what golf fields feel like. And, that's what we have this week.
Yeah, I agree with you. There is some value up top and you could potentially get there. I think there's, justifiable bets up there too. So I'm on board with that thought process. And I think that does make sense. But overall, vulnerable favorites is good for us if we're trying to bet some non-short numbers for this week. Okay. Further down the list, who has got good for him, but low DFS salary this week?
So that'd be Bud Cauley. 9,800 is the salary.
Love to see it.
He's at a 1.30 true strokes gained per round with 6th at the Players, T4 at Valspar, with a positive strokes gain across all facets in that span. Was 2nd in approach at the Valspar. I did notice that Xander led at the Valspar in approach, so just
Xander back
away. The short game is rough right now, but and Cauley's 10th in approach the last 3 months, and he's got 2 top 20s and 6 starts here. So I think you're going to talk more about him later. I think that's interesting. Mm-hmm. Justin Rose at a 1.29, salary's only 9,000. Missed the cut at the Players, Genesis, and Farmers, but was top 10 at API and Pebble. So kind of some hot and cold for Team Rose there. Jacob Bridgman, I'll talk more about him later for sure. Salary's 9,600. He's at a 1.27. Missed the cut last week with poor wedge play, but 3 top 15s in his 4 prior starts. He's a great putter. He's good enough tee to green, I think, where that's going to play this week. Lee Hodges, right below him in salary at 9,200, right below him in the recent form at a 1.25, just 0.02 strokes per round worse than Bridgman in this sample. Kind of a similar profile. They're like 35th and 38th respectively. in a tee to green play the last 3 months. Hodges, though, did make the cut with T11 last week in Houston. He's made all 6 cuts in 2025 with positive approach in all of them. Up and down form at TPC San Antonio with 2 missed cuts, but a 6th in between that. So not a name I was initially drawn to, but I think is a little bit appealing now. And then, again, already referenced this, the last name before that big drop to Spieth at a 0.90 is Alex Smalley, a name we've talked about a lot. Salary's down to 9,100, but he's missed the cut in Houston and the Valspar with bad irons. Had been top 25 in 6 of 7 starts prior since the calendar flipped over to 2025. He's also missed the cut here all 3 tries with a pretty bad short game. So I see why the salary's down. I'm not necessarily blindly looking to jump back in, but this also kind of tells me, though, there's not a lot of undervalued $8,800 guys who are just as good a form as anybody else. Yeah. There's like a top, I mean, it sounds random to say, but there's like a top 14 and then there's kind of a jump down. Not that three months is the most predictive sample, but no. You mentioned like the last 6, it's a little similar where, right. So you got to get like, and the thing that's hard is that indicates to me you got to get your guys at the top because everyone else is kind of, there's not a lot of differentiation. But we also said we're okay kind of moving away a little bit from the favorites. I think that'll make a lot more sense when we talk DFS and also like our favorite outrights, because I don't want to get out completely on those top guys. But what I think it really means is there's a couple names that they might be up there in salary, they might be up there in the win odds, but I don't see enough. When I do see it, I want to get in, though.
Yep, I think that's what I would think as well. Okay. Weather for this week, as mentioned, is not perfect by any means. Wind speed's pretty low early Thursday, but then they go up later in the day. They don't get above 10, so not super itchy about Thursday. But Friday is windier, starting at 10 miles per hour and peaking at 15 miles per hour. But there are also storms Friday morning, which is why I'm annoyed with my 3 balls on Saturday. So I don't know if we should wave stack. I think we'll probably just play things pretty straight here, but just noting there is some weather in the forecast for that situation. Also windy Saturday and Sunday, potentially some rain there too. Things could play a bit tougher over the weekend. So honestly, may just make things play tougher, may disrupt some golf on Friday morning, but overall not the worst weather situation, but just noting that there could be some wind Friday through Sunday. Let's take a look now at the betting odds at FanDuel Sportsbook and try to identify our favorite bets for this week. Brandon, let's begin things with the outrights. When you look at those for this week, who stands out to you? Which outrights do you want to plug at FanDuel Sportsbook?
I kind of messaged you on Slack and I said, I don't really care what my model says too much, which I don't do this very often. I was like, I like Patrick Cantlay this week. I know he hasn't played here. And then I modeled things out and I was like, oh, okay, I like Patrick Cantlay this week. That's totally fine. Over the last 50 rounds, he is top 22 in all 4 strokes gain stats. He's 16th off the tee, which again, not a key stat, but 11th in approach, 13th around the green, and 22nd in putting. Kind of looking for a guy who does a bit of everything at this course, and he does that. So again, I know he hasn't played here, but the form to me right now is really interesting. He was able to finish 15th at Century, which I know is a smaller field, but 5th at the American Express, which I know is not, full shot length necessarily, but with bad irons because the rest of his game is so good. If you had to kind of step back and not say, okay, over the last X rounds, you just kind of say, who's the best golfer in this field? You'd probably say Ludwig, and then you'd probably say Patrick Cantlay, and then you probably wouldn't have too much like argument over that. Like maybe you put Hideki there or something, or if you really like Tommy, maybe you could argue that. But to me, Cantlay checks every box of a good golfer. And over his last 4 starts, he's gained at least 0.80 strokes per round with his approach play, which is really good. 3 of those were over a 1. I joked about the TGL championship angle, but I think Patrick Cantlay is finally forgotten enough in like the grand scheme of golf where I'm really interested in watching what he does from a major standpoint this year. But frankly, nothing would, I know it's Patrick Cantlay. He's always like nonplussed about everything, but I don't want to get this wrong, but I feel like when Billy Horschel made that sick putt in TGL on the 7th or not the 17th, I guess the 14th, Everyone's going nuts. Billy Horschel's like he said he blacked out. I'm pretty sure I just hear Patrick Cantlay say like, "Nice putt, Billy." Like, I love that. And he's doing pretty much everything that you would ask for a golfer to do to win at TPC San Antonio. So for me, Cantlay 18-1. That's where I'm starting this week.
He had that sick drive Cantlay did during TGL, like one of the final holes that like kind of helped set up the win for them. Looked like any other shot, which is why I slacked you. It's like, has he ever smiled? Like, is there a documented Patrick Cantlay smile at any point? But like you said, he's playing good golf. And honestly, selfishly, I'm excited to get the narrative data about the TGL bump because, you know, love a good narrative. Is it a positive? Is it a negative? Because like, you know, when Shane Lowry won his major, I'm like, I can't bet Shane Lowry for like 6 weeks because like guy's going to be like out partying justifiably, having a good time, celebrating. I don't really got to worry about that with Cantlay, but I do want the data about the TGL championship, which could help there. But I think that the reason why I was couching things before and saying like, yes, I think there's some value up top, but I want to go elsewhere. The reason I was couching is because I do think that Cantlay is a very defensible bet, 18-1, given how good the form is, given that we know the longer term form for Cantlay is better than like the more recent form. When you combine these two things together, I think that like I'd probably rank, like if we're power ranking this field, I'd probably put Cantlay or Tommy 1. If we consider course, I'd probably put one of those two guys 1. Is that too far or no?
I don't think so. It's always tough because it sounds like I love Ludwig. He seems really likable. I know how good of a golfer he is, but it does feel like he's still kind of a little more course dependent, which isn't even fair.
Sure.
But for me, like there's a lot of question marks where he'll lose with approach. He'll lose with the wedges. I don't want that from a 12-1 favorite all the time. So I get it from an upside standpoint, but I think to answer your question, I kind of said like who's the best golfer. It's like, to me, it's like Ludwig, Cantlay, Fleetwood. If you're power ranking for this week, just, you know, if you could play anyone or everyone was the same odds, like, I think it's, to me, Cantlay over Fleetwood to start things off.
Same tier, but I put Cantlay first.
Yeah, because Cantlay does mathematically just have a bigger ceiling.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think he's kind of on the uptick. I don't know if Fleetwood's like peaking. He might just be like a long.
His baseline's been really high, so I don't think it's really peaking. He's just kind of like he's been here for a while.
It's so hard to like then expect him to get better. Correct. Whereas like Xander was adding a lot of ball speed, and maybe Tommy is, and I'm not
sure
catching like, but for me, it's Cantlay number 1.
Yep, I'd agree with that too. Okay, so you're on Patrick Cantlay 18-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Which other outrights are you eyeing for this week at TPC San Antonio?
So we talked about him. Anybody who's listened to the whole show knows it's going to be Denny McCarthy at 28-1. Like a lot of what he does, you know, he's always the type of golfer who I think is better than perception because he plays a lot of courses that just require a ton of distance, and he's not allergic to gaining distance at this point. He can kind of do it in certain fields, which is interesting, but he's played this course well. In 2018, he was T20. He did miss the cut in 2019, but since then, in 2021, T34, in 2022, T18, and then last year, runner-up with great putting, great wedges, but also good irons. We talked about this already, but he is at his peak career 50-round moving average in strokes gained approach, according to Data Golf right now. You love to see that. Over his last 5 starts, he's gained 1.04, 1.19, 0.79, 0.90, and 0.73 strokes from approach per round. Those are great numbers. And with how good his short game is, with how good his course history is, this is a good week for Denny McCarthy. He's not the only name here that I would consider necessarily. I know you're going to talk about somebody else, but I don't know what else you'd want from Denny McCarthy right now to see him put everything together and finally get a PGA Tour win.
Yeah, I feel like when I was looking through the list of golfers for this week, Daniel Berger did stand out first. We'll talk about him in a second. But like the next guy up was like, oh, it just makes so much sense for Danny McCarthy, given how good the irons are right now. we talk about trying to prioritize golfers who are good from approach through putting for this week. And that's kind of like, he's not the poster boy for it, but he's like pretty close. If you bump down the emphasis on off the tee play, Denny McCarthy will benefit. And we get that for this week. We saw him go absolutely bananas on Sunday last year at this very same course. I feel like he just checks too many boxes for me not to be there. 28-1 is not a long number. That's pretty short for a guy like Denny McCarthy. But I think when you combine the form, combine the irons, combine the course history with vulnerable favorites up top, I think there is still enough there to think McCarthy is a really good bet at 28-1 for this week.
Who else you like?
I did allude to it. Do like Daniel Berger as my other guy for this week. And I will admit I did pick out Berger first before I picked out McCarthy for this week. I think you could go with a non-outright for Berger if you wanted to, because he's been a bit more consistent than high upside this year, but I don't want to put him in the Tommy bucket where it's like, okay, really high baseline, not enough volatility to bet for an outright. I want to put him in the bucket because it's still a pretty small sample of Berger in this form. And I don't want to say that he can't have that upside. Really good at the driver, Berger is, but strong elsewhere too. That should mesh well with this course. He was runner-up at the RSM, runner-up at the Phoenix Open, top 25 in 4 consecutive since the WM Phoenix Open. So again, you could go for a top 10. I don't mind that. But if you're skeptical of the upside and want to bank on more of the consistency, I do think that Berger is a guy who fits well there too. But to me, I think that I don't want to write off the upside yet, just because he hasn't shown it yet. And like yet in this specific subset, he did show before all the injuries added up for Berger. So Berger 35, I like him quite a bit. Where are you at on Berger for this week?
He's a name that I'm gonna miss. Like, I just know it. Like, I see it. It was kind of like what we had with Justin Thomas to a lesser degree, where I see it, but you can't always be there.
Yeah.
And
my Taylor Pendrith betting history might say otherwise. I kind of can't always be there. You'd be surprised at my resilience.
So it's not lost on me that he's trending up, that at his peak, he could be, I mean, if he weren't hurt, in the past, like he would be in this conversation of like with Cantlay and Fleetwood and Ludwig. That's how good of a golfer he is at his peak. So I get it. Not going to talk you out of him. There's just other names here too, where it's like Sam Burns, Tom Kim, like these guys have been at different times of this year, or last year, like they'd be 18-1 with Cantlay. Sure. So like there's a little bit of that factored in, but I think Berger at 35 is a great shout. It is something I looked at, but I couldn't quite get there myself.
Okay, so I've got Berger at 35. You've got Cantlay at 18. We both have Denny McCarthy 28-1 for this week. What about the non-outrights? Where are you seeing value there?
So I'm going to go with a name we've talked about a good bit, Jacob Bridgman. I like him. I will go so far as to say top 10, but if I'm not opposed to the top 20 to play a little safer, because I always...
You went the other direction. I thought you were going to go the other way because I mentioned before there were some golfers in the 60 range who I wasn't opposed to. I might have bet Bridgman personally this week to win too. So, I think you could go both ways on this one, more conservative or more aggressive.
It's a tricky one because he's the type of player who, he missed the cut last week with bad wedge play, but he's been top 15 in 3 of the 4 starts prior to that. He's a great long-term putter. He putted well on these greens last year despite missing the cut. And over the last 3 months, he's 35th in strokes gained, tee to green, so it's good enough. But it's a strange profile because it's not usually what we're looking for, where like you can be forgiving of some imperfections. But this is a guy who...
I got bad news. He withdrew.
I was wondering why he didn't pull this up.
Well, I was like, I control F'd it because I was like, where's Bridgman? But it happened recently. So like, that's why it happened like mid record. So it's like, we missed it. But Bridgman withdrew. So I couldn't find his odds, but he withdrew. I'm very sad about this because I had him as a non-outright too.
Okay. All right.
That means my bet voids. Dang it. Damn.
All right. Let me look up some numbers right here real quick.
All right. Well, this is Bridgman withdrawing opens more win equity for Denny McCarthy and Daniel Berger. That 1.4 1.8 or 1.9%. It is now on the table. All going to those two guys to serve my agenda.
Boy, he was 9th in approach through putting as well. Let me.
Is it too late for Bridgman to re-enter?
Well, we'll have to ask him, I guess. I don't know.
Okay.
That's fine because I have other options. You mentioned like the approach through putting angle. I think this is the type of week where it's interesting. And to clarify, that's approach, like strokes gained approach, strokes gained around the green, and strokes gained putting. It's the same theory as strokes gained tee to green, just with 3 different stats, including putting and taking out off the tee. I'm going to go. Is Sam Burns still in the field? You seem preoccupied. Answer my question.
I don't know, man.
you seem distraught.
I got a question about something else on Twitter. Gonna be honest. I just search on Twitter for dudes, and there's no Sam Burns here, so I think we're okay.
Okay. All right. So Sam Burns over the last.
Now I'm trying to search in the URL bar. I'm all a mess. Okay, there we go. I found him. We're good.
Is he
plus 450 for top 10? Yeah.
Okay. So his irons have been, not exactly where you want them. He's got 3 straight with really bad iron play. That's not lost on me. However, long term, he's a solid iron player. He's just kind of going through it right now. So it's not the best sort of recipe. However, what he does is pretty much has one of the best short games that we see in pretty much any field he's in. And specifically this week, strokes gained short game. So around the green plus putting, he is first. He is good enough just with the short game to be 5th in this field over the last 50 rounds, according to Data Golf, to be 5th in strokes gained approach through putting while ranking 63rd in approach play. For me, Burns does enough for some upside. Don't mind him for a top 20, but Sam Burns with good iron play, which we've seen as recently as the WM Phoenix Open, where coincidentally he actually lost with wedges in putting for the first time, losing both in, I guess, technically over a year. So you don't expect that. So for me, Sam Burns, if there's no Jacob Bridgman, I'll take some Sam Burns as well.
Tragic. No Bridgman. I'm very sad about that. But Burns plus 450 top 10. Where are you seeing value there? Any other non-outrights for you?
Yeah. Harry Hall to finish top 20. I'll take that. Was plus 270. I don't know if the Bridgman stuff's going to shake things up or when exactly.
I'm assuming it's not going to have a ton of ripple effects in the market. Despite my jokes about justifying Denny and Berger, I feel like we'll be pretty safe here. Harry Hall is. Now I get paranoid over. He's 260.
260.
Okay. Actually.
Sorry. Yeah, I knew it was going to change.
Sorry.
Especially in like a top 20 market. Get out of here.
Yeah,
so he's
right. So you're right. Because Bridgman had 100% equity inside the top 10. You're right. It does change things.
So he is 8th in this field in approach through putting over the last 50 rounds. He is losing more. So it's a similar kind of profile to Sam Burns right now. Losing more with the irons than you'd want, but he's such a great putter and wedge player that this is the type of week where I'm okay with that. Scrambling itself is one of the strongest correlations to success, TPC San Antonio, and that's kind of what he can do with around the green and putting. He's got 2 made cuts here as well with a T28 and a T58, and that's with the fact he was not as good of a golfer in those years as he is now. This is by far his best PGA Tour season or his best professional season, and so plus 260 Harry Hall for one of the best short games in the field. I'm on board with that. And by one of the best, I mean second best behind Sam Burns. So I guess I'm just in on these short game guys to, make it work at a course where historically, statistically, that stuff's okay to rely on.
They're short game kings. We have short kings. We have short game kings. I think that's what we're going to go with. The short game kings, Sam Burns top 10 plus 450 and Harry Hall top 20 plus 260. My favorite non-outright for this week is going to be a guy who made a lot of noise with the players, actually in contention for almost the entire event, and then followed up with some good play the next week, and that's Bud Colley. Bud Colley plus 450 for a top 10 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. I think it's a pretty good number. Sixth of the players when all was said and done. Then was fourth at the Valspar. In both those events, Colley had really good iron play. The driving has been good too, along with some, I would say above baseline for Bud Colley short game. It's never been a strength of his necessarily. So he's not a short game king like Sam Burns or Harry Hall, but it's still been good enough in those metrics. 39th year last year, even before the form really picked back up for Colley post injury. So getting him at plus 450, iron play has been really good for him at two pretty different courses. And now goes to a place where that iron play can matter a bit once again, as it always does. So I think sitting at plus 450 for a top 10, Bud Colley to me makes a lot of sense for this week. I know he's not like the typical archetype we talked about so far, Brandon, but where do you sit on Bud Colley 450 for a top 10?
So we've kind of historically been Bud Colley guys. Kind of say more so me than you. He doesn't rate out well for me this week, unfortunately. I think it's a little bit hyper recent in terms of what he's doing in the sort of turning things around. But what I will say is he's, played pretty well here historically. He's got 2 missed cuts, but 4 made cuts out of the 6. That's fine. The iron play though, he kind of can spike there historically and recently. If you want some semblance of upside, like I have no issue with it. He just didn't quite make it over to me.
All right. So I got Bud Colley plus 450 for a top 10 for this week. Let's talk some DFS. We haven't talked a lot of DFS yet in this show. So let's talk some DFS for this week. And a lot of our discussion around the favorites does obviously translate to daily fantasy as well. Ludwig, the highest salary guy, 12K, followed by Tommy at 11.9, Connors 11.8, and then Cantlay 11.6. I could see this going two ways, Brandon. The first one is take the discount on Cantlay and make him your number one guy. Other way is kind of play into the tiers you were discussing before and potentially jam in 2 of these top guys. And maybe it's not, Cantlay, maybe you like Hideki or something like that. I think that you could either start with Cantlay or I want Cantlay in there. I think is what I'm saying. But do you want to go with a guy above him paired with Cantlay? Or do you want to start with Cantlay and then dive down to maybe a Keegan at 10.9, a Denny at 10.7? What's your thought process here at the top?
I don't quite see enough low-end value to build around to get 2 golfers with an 11 starting their salary or Ludwig at 12.
That's where I settled in as my preferred route as well.
I think my comfort level is going to be like a Cantlay McCarthy start.
Yeah.
Also okay with like Akshay at 10.8, for example, but
I like Keegan at 10.9 personally as well.
Yeah, I have no issues with that. And then you get Daniel Berger at 10.4. So if I could get 3 names above 10,000, that's interesting. That could include Berger. Cantlay, McCarthy, Berger, as Jim has pulled up here, 9,100 left per golfer. I think that's viable. I'm okay with some names in the 8K range, but I don't see a lot of bankability in the 7K range. And I also am just more okay with the $8,000 golfers as opposed to I think this golfer is undersalaried. So
no one really,
for me, I'm going to go a little more balanced
down there is what I would say. There's no one I think is super undersalaried in the 8K range.
Yeah. And nobody separates
right.
I mean, I don't even know where the last name I'd say is truly a separation from anybody else.
I mean, I think the final separation for me was Bridgman pre-withdrawal.
Bridgman would have. I mean, I guess I could maybe say Harry Hall at 95 before things fall off. But I mentioned Lee Hodges is in interesting form. Yeah. So you have some names, but it's a lot easier to fill out. And this probably sounds silly, but it's also not always the case. It's a lot easier to figure out who I want in the top 3 slots as it is the bottom 3. And sometimes it's easier to fill out hey, look, these are the 3 guys who make a lot of sense. Then you can filter in the studs from there. I don't see it that way this week.
Yeah, I think that I want to commit to the studs. If we're talking if you're multi-entering, like I'd probably just commit to whoever you want to use up top. Rotate through if you want to go like a Cantlay with a McCarthy, then a Cantlay with a Keegan, or a Cantlay Keegan Burger. That's fine, but like I'd have some anchors, I guess is the way that I phrase it. And like I'm not gonna have Cantlay in every lineup. I'd have Tommy in a couple too. I think personally at 11-9, it's my number 2 up there. But it would really be about having higher exposure to the studs and then rotating through the value plays, because I just don't think there's a huge difference between them. So I'm fine kind of taking the Brandon approach of like duplicate a lineup, change out your value plays. I think that's the way I want to play things this week.
So it's fun when we agree.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about the guys above 10K?
I don't think so. I think it's going to be Cantlay, McCarthy, Berger, and then like Akshay and Keegan. I know it sounds dismissive of Ludwig, Fleetwood, and Connors, but I'm gravitated toward Cantlay. He's the lowest salaried of them all. There is like that $100 gap as well between Connors and Cantlay. That might kind of subconsciously stick with people. But I feel like I made the case for Cantlay. He's my guy at the top this week. And really those are, I'm fine with Sam Burns at 10-1. But those are kind of the 3 to 6 names that I'm drawn to most.
Yep.
I don't really love anybody else too much.
That's kind of my thought process too. So let's go down below Burns. Woodland at 10K and lower. When you're in the Woodland down range, I know no one's like grabbing your attention necessarily, but who are the guys who you think are the most defensible? I don't know the right way to phrase this here.
Yeah, like that's the other awkward part of this. Like you built that lineup with Cantlay, McCarthy, and Berger and have 9,100 left. Usually I'm trying to get back up to like the upper nines here. Sure. I don't quite feel that. Like
I feel it with Cauley at 9.8, but like that's kind of it.
Yeah, I could see like Mav McNeely maybe, sure. But the call to get back up to Bud Cauley and Mav McNeely, not as strong as it usually is.
Sure, that's fair. Yeah. I think it comes down to like there's no one really just want to commit to down here. So who are you good with? Because I'm good with Cauley.
I'm good in the upper nines. We're kind of specifying. Yeah. I'm good with JT Poston. I'm good with Maverick McNeely, and I'm good with Bud Cauley.
Okay. I have no pushback on that list personally. Would have been Bridgman, RIP. I like Poston enough to be okay with that. I prefer Cauley. Mav, I tend to be pretty okay with too. The chipping is troubling. But I can't, there's no one who's perfect down here. So I would say probably Cauley 1, Poston 2, McNeely 3. And then honestly, you mentioned Harry Hall before. He might be the next guy. I'm like, yeah, sure. I'll use him.
Yeah. Harry Hall's got a little more of a volatile profile.
Yeah.
With being so short game dependent than someone like Ben Griffin, who's also 9,500, who's a better iron player. But Ben Griffin doesn't quite hit the upside a lot. He's one of the lower ceiling plays mathematically.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit interesting. Maybe it's more game type dependent, but Harry Hall is probably my preference here.
Yeah.
And then, I'm fine with Lee Hodges. We kind of talked about him earlier. Good iron player, just sort of good overall ball striker, 24th in the field over the last 50 rounds. Pretty accurate as well. Short game in both facets a little bit iffy, but it is what it is. Alex Smalley at 91, sort of all right with. So it's a lot of names I'm all right with as opposed to actively loving, which going back to that 3-man build, not saying every lineup I build is going to have Cantlay, McCarthy, and Berger, but if that's how I feel about this range, I might as well just play the guys I really like, get back up to Akshay from Berger as like my third guy kind of thing.
Sure.
And live down here and just cycle in these names.
Yeah, because I don't think the gap between like the mid 9K range and the 9 flat and like upper 8 range is that big. So it's kind of like, whatever, it's fine. I don't really care too much. Like there are more names I want to click on at salary at 9,000 and like 88, 89 than there are in the mid 9 range. So I think I agree with that. I think that I'm committing more and more as we talk to going with Berger as my number 3. I also do like Burns at 10-1. I don't mind Burns, maybe you do want to get back up to Akshay, something like that. That's fine. So I think that more and more, I think I will probably have 3 golfers at 10K or higher in my lineup for this week. I did want to mention Hodges too. At 92, I do think he works. Smalley as well. So it's not like we're on the same guys, but just the general sentiment of not super into this range. What about 9K and lower value plays for you this week?
Talked about Matt Kuchar a bit. I think he does enough. He's still a plus iron player over the last 50. Kind of a good stat score for me. Let's see where he is. Approach through putting. 15th at a salary of just 8,800. Your cousin Seamus Power, also somewhat similar, not nearly as good of a putter as Kuchar from within 15 feet, but also good wedge player, solid irons, like should be able to do enough at 88. Those are the 2 that I think are really standing out to me in the upper 8K range. What about for you?
So I think I need to stop using Seamus specifically because these push notifications about how Irish golfers are performing keep coming. And I think if I stop using him in DFS and stop like starring him on a leaderboard, maybe I'll stop getting them. He wasn't even in this most recent one. It was just Rory. And I'm like, it's Northern Ireland. Like, it's confusing. But it's like, I don't know how I got put on this list from Google News saying like, hey, funnel me all the... It's picking up on this, I'm sure, right now. It's like, oh yeah, we want to send more push notifications. I don't know what happened, but I got to stop using him. That said, if I weren't trying to evade all these weird push notifications, I would use Seamus Power, which means I'm going to use him. Just don't tell my phone. So I'm going to use him. I also do like Ryan Gerard at $9,000. Iron play for him has been like really, really good recently. Not good around the green, which is concerning for this week, but hoping he can just avoid disaster, I guess, is kind of looking for there. Gerard's 9,000. And then other guy I had on my list is Andrew Putnam. He would be if I'm looking to like get way back up for my 4th golfer. That could be a consideration there. Putnam, 85. I feel like he's the poster boy of approach through putting. It seems like him and Novak always seem to be the guys who stand out most there. But if I really need to jump down here, Putnam's the guy I would turn to most. So to me, below at 9K and lower, Seamus Power 88, but again, don't tell my phone, please. Putnam 85, and then Gerard 9,000. Those are the primary guys who stood out to me.
Putnam is on my list at 85. He is 6th over the last 50 rounds and approach through putting. But also Eric Cole just above that at 86. 2 straight top 12s with positive approach through putting in each of those. No issues with Gerard, but I will shout out if you're really looking to kind of differentiate a bit, Henrik Norlander, 7,600, continues to gain with approach. Missed the cut on the number last week. Just
I know.
Can't really buy a...
I'm aware, thanks. As did all my other golfers. It was great.
Can't really buy a putt or, chip it particularly well, but at least it's worth noting to some degree. He is like the only real green in the stat categories among golfers starting with a 7 in their salary, but the underlying putting splits don't exactly scream that regression's coming.
Yeah.
By any means. I just figured I'd shout him out. If you're like, look, I want to play Ludwig and Tommy or Ludwig and Cantlay or something. How do I get there? To me, Norlander is the name that jumps out the most.
Okay. I think that makes sense. So who are your DFS loves for this week?
Cantlay, McCarthy, Daniel Berger.
We're 3 for 3 so far on overlap.
Yeah. That's where things get, in terms of loves, that's where things get a little shaky because I could probably kick out anybody else in like my main lineup. And even Berger's shaky. I could see playing Sam Burns instead, or I could see if I had an extra $300 to $400 or $500 getting up to like Akshay or
and I try to get to Keegan at 10-9. So it's the same thought process there. Keegan is like a secondary love for me personally.
So probably, I don't even know how to put Harry Hall in that conversation.
Yeah.
I might say like low ceiling Andrew Putnam, honestly, because he does literally everything you want at this course, and he does it week after week. It's just a matter of whether that's the that's the question that's being asked of him or not, and it
Yeah.
is this week. So maybe Andrew Putnam, maybe Eric Cole.
Yeah. So I've got Cantlay, Berger,
McCarthy.
Denny, Keegan with a semi-like. And
Mhm.
then guys I will use include Bud Cauley, Harry Hall, Lee Hodges, maybe Smalley. I think Smalley's below Hodges to me personally. I like Gerard more than Smalley too, just because the irons are so good. And then other guys I'll consider are Seamus Power, Andrew Putnam there as well. Let's finish up with our win picks for this week. I am the worst at daily fantasy. So you get to go. Do you want to pick first and fourth, or do you want to pick second and third?
I will pick first and fourth, and
Okay.
I will pick Denny McCarthy.
Okay, I like that. I think that's the right game theory move this week, and we both liked him. We both think he's a good bet. So I would have taken him if you hadn't. So I think that's a good move on your part. You can have Danny McCarthy 28, which means I will take Daniel Berger at 35. The only guy I've actually bet this week is Bridgman. I get the refund from that. So can't take him, which means I could be a D-hole and take Cantlay. Are we allowed to say D-hole? I don't know. Anyway, man. I mean, Cantlay is probably the next guy I take. So like, if I'm just like ignoring what I know you want, I'll like sleep better at night. If I'm like, yeah, I actually would take Cantlay next. So I'll take Cantlay at 18. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, that just ruins the spreadsheet that I laid out, and I got to figure this out.
Wait, who'd you pencil in for me?
I did, and I was like,
oh, okay.
I just didn't think you'd take Cantlay.
Yeah, he would be next to my list.
That's fine.
I probably would have taken Bridgman if he were still in the field, but oh well.
Yeah. I'll probably go longer then.
Okay.
Well, let me double check where this is, because Jacob Bridgman and all his win equity.
I did consider one other golfer, and I'll let you kind of. I don't think you're gonna guess who it is, but there was one other guy I considered.
I'm surprised you didn't take Keegan. Basically, where's Sam Burns right now?
25 is just kind of short for Keegan. I can't lay it at 18.
I'm trying. I have 500 tabs open as always, but Sam Burns, is he still 50? I can't imagine he's still 50. He's 45.
Yeah.
I can go Sam Burns at 45 then.
Okay. Tom Kim was the guy I considered briefly, just because the irons are really good right now. I think that if you were to force me to be like, no, Jim, I'll quit if you take Cantlay. No, don't do it. The putter's really bad right now for Tom Kim, but we know that can be volatile in a smaller sample. He's okay around the greens. I probably would have gone Tom Kim, but I'm fine with where we settle in. So you've got Sam Burns 45 and Denny McCarthy 28. I have Patrick Cantlay at 18 and Daniel Berger 35-1. Any final thoughts for you for this week?
We covered a lot. I know there's going to be people were like, wow, you guys really don't like Tommy or, Ludwig. It's not really that. Everything points to Cantlay for me this week. Not saying I wouldn't budge off of that, but to me, of the top guys, Cantlay stands out the most. And from there's not a ton of long shots or values that I love. So I'm good to kind of keep it a little bit tight with the core. Get the Cantlay, McCarthy, Berger / Burns / I probably should have taken Akshay, I guess. I keep talking about him positively, but overall, I don't think there's a consensus. So if you're feeling a certain way, you're probably justified.
All right. That is all that we have here for this week. As mentioned, twofer coming up next week for Augusta. Recording on Monday, the heat check going through outrights and DFS picks. Tuesday, a more in-depth betting preview for covering the spread. Both those shows on the FanDuel Golf Betting YouTube page. So go subscribe there, leave us a thumbs up on this show, and turn on notifications to get those shows as they go live next week. Brandon, people have questions for you on the socials. Where can they find you there?
I am on X at Gdula13, GDULA13, and on Blue Sky at Gdula.
And I am on X and Blue Sky at JimSannes. You can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for, big thank you to our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work on the video side of things. Thank you, Justin, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your bets and your DFS picks for the Valero Texas Open. We'll talk to you once again next week to preview the Masters. This has been the Heat Check, a FanDuel Research podcast.